Floral design is the skilled creation and production of those designed objects. It is the design practice of floristry. The differentiation reflects the way in which commercial advice literature, such as the Retail Florist's Handbook, published in 1960, makes a clear distinction with separate chapters on floral art, the cut flower department, and the sale of bedding and pot plants. Recreational flower arranging is the amateur practice and usually takes the form of vase arrangements and small-scale decorations in domestic spaces, but also sometimes in churches. But what flower arranging and floristry share is floral design, which is what I'm looking at. Historically, there have been a variety of words used in Britain to describe people working with flowers. The term florist, dating back to the 1630s, originally referred to amateur flower growers who grew specific flowers solely for competitive purposes. By 1822, the horticulturalist writer J.C. Loudon described two types of florist: those growing fine flowers solely for decorative and competitive purposes, and market florists who grow flowers to sell as nosegays and ornamental plants for hiring. By 1921, the Dictionary of Occupational Terms provides three groups working commercially with cut flowers. So we have florist, flower garden, flower farmer, flower grower, who cultivates flowers in nursery gardens. So they basically grow their own flowers to sell. You also have florist as in a retail shopkeeper, and sometimes they grow their own flowers and sometimes they don't. This is a picture from the end of the 19th century of a florist. I've no idea if he grew his own flowers. He might have done, given the fact that he's also a seedsman, so he provides seeds for people. Then you have the floral decorator, who decorates ballrooms, tables with flowers, ferns, etc. So they go out and they create installations, basically. And this is a picture from Constance Spry's shop. Constance Spry opened her first shop in 1928, and she was a key figure in originally working for very high status clients, aristocrats and royalty, but she produced a lot of advice literature for both professional and amateur flower arrangers. Interestingly, the term floral decorator predates the 1920s. Henry James's novella In the Cage, which was published in 1898, has a character who has invented a new career for herself by going to rich people's houses to do their floral arrangements. And then lastly, we have flower girls. So it's costermongers and hawkers are people who sell things on the street. And a key part of those are flower girls. They're written about at some length in Mayhew's London Poor, which was published in 1851. And by the late 19th century, they were regarded as a characteristic part of the London street scene. So they would obtain their flowers from Covent Garden wholesale market, and then they would form them into smaller bunches or posies and create buttonholes for men to wear on their lapels. By the end of my period, 1960, flower girls had practically died out, and land values in London had decreased. Flower farms were sold off. Most cut flowers for the retail trade were bought wholesale at Covent Garden, and the term florist had become the catch-all term for anyone selling cut flowers and or floral arrangements. Actually, could everybody mute, because I can hear sound from somebody, and it's a bit off-putting. Thank you. So why am I looking at the years 1935 to 1960? One of the reasons was I found difficult to shorten the period that I'm researching is because there were various key events that took place in the interwar years, including the creation of the Florists Telegraphic Delivery Association, which is now known as Interflora, which started in the US in 1910, with British florists joining in 1918, and the formal establishment of the British Union as an independent organisation in 1935. However, the period 1939 to 1960 provides more available primary sources because of the way in which both commercial floral design and the amateur flower arranging world developed, particularly after the Second World War ended. In 1949, The Florist and Landscape Gardener, a monthly trade subscription journal, was first published. Within 2 years, they had jettisoned the Landscape Gardeners just to become The Florist, and it was the first trade publication to focus solely on commercial floristry in its entirety, and it included design advice, material culture, and consumer relations. In 1951, the Society of Floristry was established by commercial florists to address the perceived lack of standardized skills, education, and training in the field. In 1954, the Society was appointed the National Examination Board for Floristry examinations by the Ministry of Education and created a syllabus for a 3-year course. And this was the first time such a body had been created, with commercial training previously consisting of some private floristry schools and an informal apprenticeship system. And at the same time that the Florist was started in 1949, the first amateur flower arranging club was started in Dorset. The 1950s saw a surge of such women being set up specifically for women, and the National Association of Flower Arrangement Societies was created in 1958. So why am I interested in London? London was the site of the largest wholesale flower market in Britain at Covent Garden. The market sold both domestically and internationally produced flowers, although the ratio of domestic produce decreased after the Second World War. And London also had the largest pool of all classes from which to draw both consumers and suppliers. This is a notice in The Florist and Landscape Gardener from it's from the second issue, so August 1949. And it's the notice of the death of a woman called Nellie Keeley. Now, Nellie Keeley was originally a flower girl, so she was selling things on the street as per the original definition that I showed you. And then she created a shop in her residence in Short's Garden in Longacre. And I found her in the census of 1911, and you can see Elaine Keeley, head, age 44, and she self-defined as a florist. And she also has a sister working with her. And her address is given down at the bottom of Short's Gardens. What is interesting about Nellie Keeley is not just that she graduated from the street to a shop, but the location of her shop and her residence. I'm putting together a map of I'm mapping all the florists and suppliers in London during the period. This is a close-up of the map that has Nellie Keeley here. You can see her in the top left quadrant, and then she's within 2-3 minutes walking distance of the flower market. So this is Covent Garden Floral Hall. It's very much as she would have known it. It was the first space in Covent Garden for specifically selling wholesale flowers was opened in 1861, and a larger hall, which is this one, was then built 10 years later. And this was still in use until the entire market moved out to a new site in Vauxhall, south of the river. And this is now Covent Garden that has the restaurants and the shops, and it's been completely repurposed. Covent Garden itself was a hub, it was the hub for a network of people associated with the trade, as you would imagine. So here we can see, I don't know if you can see it very clearly, you've got the market on the left, and then a shop called Cockerell's Sundries. They sold all the things that florists need that weren't flowers. So things like paper, baskets, wire, twine, card, and I'll be talking about them at length in a minute. Stefan Selander defines professionalization as the aspiration that an occupational group cherishes to reach exclusive societal advantages within their special field of knowledge and praxis. And the way in which this manifests can be broken down as practical but unique knowledge, such as surgeons or engineers, complete mastery of academic research, such as theoretical physics researchers, and control of mechanisms of power, such as lawyers. Part of my reason for choosing the period that I have was the way in which informal and formal networks were developing into formal organisations, which started to regulate and professionalise the way in which their fields were organised. In the case of amateur flower arranging, this was through competitions which had very detailed judging criteria. The number of specific flowers in an arrangement could lose the arranger a prize. For commercial florists, there was the push towards collective organisation and formalisation of training. The announcement of Nellie Keeley's death in The Florist might indicate her physical proximity to the market and to other traders and suppliers placed her within both geographical and informal networks through which knowledge could be transmitted. And the transmission of knowledge is key to the question of professionalisation and to the relationship between the commercial and the amateur. The material culture of floral arranging or floral design provides an embodying of this knowledge and is a key part of my research. I've divided the material culture into two types: the organic, which are flowers and foliage, and the non-organic, which includes equipment, tools, containers, packaging, and the use of materials such as dyes and silver foil in arrangements. This slide shows an example of non-organic material culture, specifically objects used to hold flowers in place within vase arrangements. On the left, we have the first advertisement I've found for a floral foam, Florapack. The version that's used widely now is called Oasis. It's the same thing. And this was in the second issue of the Florist and Landscape Gardener in 1949. The Florapack fits into the vase or container and the flower stems are pushed into it and held in place. As the advert says, I don't know if you can see it, it says, "In go your flowers like lightning." The middle image from the Florist and Gardener in 1950 shows a pincushion which rests onto which the flower stems are pushed and held in place. Both these adverts have been placed by regular advertisers, Cockerell's and the Florist Sundries and Wreaths Company in the journal, and they are both featured in editorial content throughout the run, establishing them as key items within the floristry network. Cockerell's, by the way, is the shop that I showed you the picture of just earlier. When we compare the language used in both advertisements, Florapack is a revolution, and the floral pincushion is the modern method of floral display. Both are appealing to notions of modernity and change. But what is really interesting is the floral pincushion, an easy-selling novelty, appears aimed at both the commercial florist and the recreational amateur flower arranger. Given that this has appeared in a trade subscription journal, but has apparently been mentioned in the national press, it is clear that the pincushion will be both used and sold by commercial florists and is an example of an object which moves across the boundary between the professional and the amateur. That this is the case can be seen in the third image on the right, which shows pincushions, wire netting, and other objects for holding flowers in place within vases. This was taken from a book called Fun with Flowers, subtitled A Treatise on the Art of Flower Arrangement by Julia Clements. First published in 1951, Fun with Flowers was described by Clements as being a way to encourage the women of grey, colourless, post-war Britain to introduce more beauty into their homes in a new, exciting and vital way. And I would argue that the omission of floral foam at this stage in Julia's work indicates its status as a solely professional item, which, unlike the pincushion, was not made available to recreational flower arrangers. Julia Clements was key in the drive towards setting up floristry clubs, or flower arranging clubs rather. And as you can see from the quote that I just gave about encouraging the women of post-war Britain, it's about encouraging women to do flower arranging. I'm now starting to grapple with how time, technologies and geographies act as factors within notions of professionalisation. And I think this is going to be key in providing a framework for my dissertation. This has been quite a gallop through my research so far, but I hope it's been of interest, and I'd welcome any comments or suggestions you might have. Thank you.